was in the end. And it seems like an action movie mixed with a horror movie, and it is revolving this one family with one twisted, at least one twisted person that really knew what he was doing. But let me tell you about the Grabbe family. Again, this is an unbelievable story, but if you want extra content from me and you like to support the channel, I'm gonna have a couple of links pinned with a pinned comment. One of them, it's my membership, where you can watch all my videos ad-free for $2.99 a month. And then Patreon, where you can get extra content. And in the last 10 days, we've covered a series that is kind of leading to our next case, Shather. So, in today's case, we're going to go to Marshall, Illinois, which is a tiny farming town about 10 miles from the Indiana border. The Grabbe family lived there. They were doing good money-wise. They wouldn't be considered rich by any big city standard, but they were the wealthy ones for their small town. This was not by their own making, although both of them were very hard workers. But most of their wealth came from an inheritance that Charlotte got from her parents, and as I mentioned, they still worked very hard and put long hours on their farm. They had soybean and cornfields, and the amount that they had kept them very, very busy. The couple had 2 children, Jeff and Jenny, and relationship-wise, they were not in this happy place. They fought a lot, and even the kids would take a side, and most of the time the kids would be on Charlotte's side, and it kind of became normal, their fighting. They experienced this their whole lives. Charlotte and Fred had been married for 23 years. And as I mentioned, their relationship was violence-filled, and it really started as soon as they got married. There was a point in their relationship fights were physical as well as arguments and overall very chaotic atmosphere. But when it was physical, it wasn't a fair fight either. Fred was 6'4" and a very big and kind of muscular guy, and Charlotte was petite. So most of the time, Fred was winning those fights. But later on in life, Jeff, their son, would get in the middle. And so not only Charlotte would experience this violent behavior, it became a punching bag for Fred. But now Jeff was quickly becoming one too. Now Fred, he was interested in younger girls too. So most of the time, he would have a few girls on the side while married. When Charlotte was 42, when Fred was 42, he was seeing this 24-year-old girl, Vicky McAllister, who was a bartender, pretty girl, blonde hair, curly hair. And when Charlotte learned about this relationship, she immediately filed for a divorce once again, and Fred ended up moving out. However, not far enough for my liking, because he moved into a small cabin that was on the same property where the family farm was at. When Fred moved out, Jeff, their son, decided to move in with his wife into the main house with his mom. He wanted to build a house in the property, and he thought it'd be great to not only keep company to his mom, but also be on the property to work and to start to build their house. But the arrangement of Fred living in the property was not working. It was this one time, recorded at least, that I could find, when Charlotte went into the cabin to get some furniture to put into the main house now that she had her son with her. But Fred was there, and they got into another big fight. After that, Charlotte ended up filing battery charges against him. It was like they were so used to this abusive and toxic relationship that they just would put themselves in this kind of situations where they had to face each other. July 24th, when Charlotte went out to the soybean fields on her tractor. This was a daily thing. She would go all day and work on the fields. She would pack a lunch with her and come back to the house before sundown. So it depended on the time of the year, how early or how late she would come. However, July here, where, in the States, is summertime. So she would stay out late. But when she didn't come home by sundown, Jeff and Jenny knew that something was terribly wrong. So they went out to look for their mother. Maybe she could have fell off the tractor. Maybe she was injured and needed help. And their mom used to tell them, if I ever am late, go and find me. I guess she knew there was a probability, the possibility maybe, that something would happen to her, especially with the horrible relationship she had with her father. They ended up finding the tractor inside a machine shed, and they found Charlotte's lunchbox on top of the front tire. They immediately knew and went back to the house and reported her mother, well, Jenny did, missing. After all the reports, police knew that they had to talk to Fred. Fred said that they did fight that day about something, and that the last time he saw his wife was when she was driving her car towards the interstate. A few days later, police found her car 16 miles away from their home, and it was across the state border in Indiana. The car was clean, no blood or signs of foul play. But they did find a gun loaded under the seat. A friend of Charlotte had reported to the police that she saw Fred in his truck and that somebody was following him in Charlotte's car. And the lady driving Charlotte's car was not Charlotte. This was a young woman with blonde, curly hair. Police also found a note from Charlotte in her safe box. In those notes, well, several of them actually, she was saying that she believed that Fred was stealing those notes, she mentioned being afraid of Fred and his business partner, Dale Kessler. Dale Kessler was questioned, and he said that he was with Fred the day that Charlotte went missing. Now, the sheriff questioned Vicky and Fred, and even brought them in front of a grand jury. But they invoked their Fifth Amendment rights, and Fred refused to do the lie detector as well. The case went cold for 3 long years, and the kids, Jenny and Jeff, tried to get help from the public by offering a reward for information. Nothing came out of that, but eventually they hired at some point couldn't control himself anymore and ended up strangling her. But this guy is a special kind of guy, because what he did after that, it's really out of a horror movie. And I'm one to watch horror movies, but I don't think that Hollywood, would catch up with this kind of cases, because it really is disturbing to know that somebody, a regular human being, is able to do what this guy did. So if you want to skip ahead a few seconds because you don't want to know, you're more than welcome to. But he was strangling her, and then Charlotte would lose consciousness, and at that point he would release her. Then he would choke her again and continue to do this over and over again until she finally never came back. Then he sodomized her body while Vicky watched. Then he filled all of her body openings with grease, put the body in a 55-gallon barrel, and loaded the barrel into the back of his pickup truck. Then he told Vicky to follow him in Charlotte's vehicle across the state line. And that is when the witness saw Vicky driving Charlotte's vehicle. They dropped it off there on the Indiana side and drove back to the farm and parked his truck near the Wabash River, where they took the barrel out and placed it near a maple tree. He poured diesel in the barrel until covering the body and lit it on fire. They sat on the riverbank while they waited for it to burn. The diesel and grease burned slowly all night long. The next morning, they knew about the search, so they put out the fire, loaded the drum back into the truck, and headed to Vicky's home. But then at sunset, they went back and did it all over again all night. By the next morning, Fred rolled the barrel into the river. The only thing left was her skull, and he threw it in the river. Now, at this point, you're probably thinking this is enough to convict Fred, but not quite. This is not backed up with physical evidence, a murder weapon, or a body. I mean, they didn't have much but her word against His name is Dan Krumrin, and he wondered how this maple tree could help them. I mean, that was a recognizable tree, and it was above the burnside, and he knew that there was a way to find some kind of evidence that could help them, with this particular case. So he requested some help from the University of Illinois, and they sent a plant biologist and an organic chemist. They explained that during the natural cycle of a tree's life, the seasons will cause a tree to grow in the spring and summer, and then go dormant in the winter. This creates a ring in the trunk and branches of every tree, which shows the growth for that year. Diesel is a highly toxic substance for a tree, so if it doesn't kill it, it will stop the growth or make it super slow, leaving some traces of this event. So they took samples of the tree, and they found that 3 rings ago, so 3 years ago, the tree was much thinner. Apparently, it went through some stress the same summer that Charlotte went missing. To make it more of a stronger case, when for some people this could be a stretch, they took samples and shredded them into sawdust and then studied it. It showed a presence of hydrocarbons found in diesel products. They took samples from the area where the barrel was at, and then on the other side, it showed that presence only on the part that Vicky said they burned the barrel. So it wasn't all around the tree. Robert Egan, who was one of the prosecutors and a very well-known one for other well-known cases, presented the evidence, and in the end, the jury was convinced that Fred was guilty of first-degree murder. At that point, we'd usually finish the case, right? Maybe talk about the victims or the family. But in this case, it's like the never-ending story. In that never-ending story seems more like a nightmare, really. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. During the trial, he was showing off his new girlfriend, Barbara Graham, and after being sentenced, she tried to break awesome idea, but I don't think they really put much effort into thinking. So what happened is she went to jail after he was sentenced, and she said to the guard that she needed to give him a love note. The officer opened the door and she shot him, or he fired 5 times, and one of them hit him in the leg. Then, like one of those cheesy action movies, she looked at him and said, "Don't make me kill you." What happened next, I'm sure you know. He never escaped, and she ended up in jail. She was sentenced to 16 years. But that's not all. 2 months later, the farmhouse and the house that Jeff had built in the property burned down to nothing. Fire marshals determined that both were intentionally set. So somebody was trying to get rid of that farm. The authorities believe that Fred had something to do with it, and maybe sending somebody out there to do the dirty work for him. However, they never found somebody that they thought did it, so they couldn't trace it back to this guy that at this point was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. But then his lawyer got his conviction overturned on a technical matter. So, not that he was innocent, but a mistake was made and he got his conviction overturned. So Vicky, who was away and under another identity, had to come back to testify. Another turn of events is the other witness that they had was Jeff, Fred's son. But a month before the trial, he magically vanished. Now Jeff was okay with the idea of his dad going to jail. So him vanishing did not mean he didn't want to testify. He was willing to do a second round for this trial, but nobody could find him. He was on a business trip to California when he lost contact with family and friends. So the judge allowed Cindy, his wife, to testify in his place. Despite Jeff not being there, Fred was convicted a second time and was sentenced to 75 years in prison. A month after the trial, Jeff's body was found floating in the water of Seal Beach in California. He had been shot 3 times, and he had an anchor Authorities believe that this was another thing that Fred did from prison. But Fred denied having anything to do with this murder. Now, I think it's easier to understand Vicky at this point. I think the girl knew who she was dealing with and why she kept silence for so long. I mean, this guy is presumably doing all this from jail. But I think that by the time that the private investigator found and became friendly with Vicky, he probably tried to give her an exit, you know. You can take the $25,000 reward and we'll get you a new name. You can move. He will never find you. And that added to what you know, she wanted to get this off her chest. Kind of led her to share everything that she knew. But I understand how she continued to live in fear of this guy Fred. In this case, I found it, it was suggested, but I found this book about it. And the last thing that they added is that as of 2018, Fred Grabbe is inmate number N57941 at Menards Correctional Center in Central Illinois. And at that point, he was eligible for parole in 2022. In the beginning, the first time he was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. And in the second trial, he got 75 years. But apparently, he has the chance to get out in 2022 if, they allow it. Now wait, there's more. I know this is like a cheap infomercial that keeps getting better. In this case, worse. In the year 2014, Fred's grandson, Adam, just gonna call him Adam, was indicted on weapons and immigration charges in Israel. He was suspected of impersonating a Navy SEAL and plotting those kaboom attacks on the Dome of the Rock. He was later diagnosed as psychotic and unfit to stand trial. He was held for a year in a mental institution in Israel, and here is the kicker. He was then released to the US, where he faces charges of stealing would have been used in the first and the second trial to try to get away with it. That's my personal belief. Just take it for what it is. So I don't really think myself that he had that. I honestly think that he was a dangerous man who had a lot of connections and knew exactly what he was doing. And if Vicky was not there when this happened, we would have never known what happened to Charlotte, and we would still be reporting her case as an unsolved mystery, or even as a missing persons case. So, kind of creepy to know that you can make some kind of a mix of diesel and grease and a burn barrel and just basically burn somebody out of their existence. I think that's kind of creepy, and I debated sharing this case that's been requested so much because I always think we don't need to feed anybody with this kind of information. As always, in the right hands can be used to learn something. In the wrong ones can be used in a way that nobody wants them to use. So, yeah. I've never heard of this combination for burning somebody. I'm sure that if a lot more people knew about it, other cases would have been a different story. Like, one of them that comes to mind is the Fallow case. You know how they tried to burn some remains and they wouldn't burn. And now you hear this case and you learn that it is possible to burn somebody out of this world and basically not leave much behind. So at the same time, it was a good thing that Vicky was there to witness the whole thing, because no matter the kind of girl she was, no matter if she was the other woman, at least it brought closure to a family. And even though I'm sure that's not what they were, the kind of closure they were looking for. Totally get Vicky. I guess at the same time, don't mess with those guys, just don't get involved with somebody you fear so much. I guess it's part of the whole thing, but being young and maybe not making very good decisions, she found herself with a very dangerous man that she knew that even from jail he was still as dangerous. Dangerous enough to make the authorities believe that he sent somebody to burn those houses in their property, and that he sent somebody to get rid of his own flesh, his son Jeff, so he could avoid his testimony for a second time in the second trial. Now, of course, that is all So